You ever wake up, look out your frosted window, and see your entire winter, your 6 months of warmth, safety, your literal survival being loaded onto a flatbed with some smug lady in a red coat, calling it community redistribution, because that's how my winter started. I know sounds like a punchline, but trust me, nobody's laughing when their heat just drives off at dawn. I stood there barefoot on cold wood thinking, so this is how it goes, huh? One day you're a neighbor, next day you're an unintentional philanthropist. Let me back up. My name's Colt Ramsey. I'm 49, just old enough to know better and stubborn enough not to care. After burning out as a paralegal in Denver, where your biggest fight's usually with the copier, not the climate, I moved up north to Montana, chasing that postcard life cabin pine trees, the whole rugged serenity gig. What they don't print on the postcard is how small-town politics makes City Hall look like kindergarten. You'd think neighbors meant friendly waves, not legal warfare over fence lines. But hey, every place has its own flavor of crazy. Anyway, back to the woodpile, my woodpile. I split and stacked every last cord myself, 15 years running. I can still feel the ache in my shoulders. But on this particular morning, it was vanishing. 2 HOA trucks, all official-looking engines, roaring white clouds into the air, and one guy in construction orange tying down my hand-split logs. And there she was, Karen Langford, Queen Bee of the HOA, standing with her clipboard like Moses about to part the Red Sea pearls glinting under her fur-lined hood. If you've never met a Karen, trust me, you'll know her when you do. She looked right through me and announced, "Community encroachment. Section 4.8C authorizes reclamation during extreme weather." Her tone made it sound like she'd practiced it in front of the mirror all week. I felt the heat rising under my collar, ironic, given I was about to lose all the actual heat I had. "That's my land, that's my wood," I told her, probably with a little more bite than I intended. She didn't blink, just tapped her clipboard and said, "Not according to the 2019 boundary plat." Like I hadn't seen that plat. Like I didn't already know it was a lie. Now I may look like just another hermit with a beard, but I used to build legal cases for a living. Only this time I wasn't drafting motions for someone else. This was personal. It was my fence, my woods, my winter. And let me tell you, when you mess with a man's firewood in Montana, you're not just picking a fight, you're signing up for a war. That first night it dropped below zero. I had barely enough kindling to keep the chill at bay. Snow started falling like it wanted to bury me alive. I sat there bundled up with a notebook and a flashlight making lists, the way only a former paralegal knows how. Evidence, violations, witnesses. Because I've seen how these things unravel, and if you don't push back pretty soon, it's not just your firewood, it's your fence, your whole damn property wrapped up in community resolutions. You think I'm exaggerating? Next day, I hiked through calf-deep snow to the mailbox, only to find a flyer, "Emergency Action Firewood. Reclaimed for redistribution. Apply through HOA Relief Program. President Karen Langford." They were advertising my logs as charity right there for the world to see. And when I got home, there was a bright orange citation pinned to my cabin door. "Unauthorized storage, $480 fine compliance required within 48 hours. Imagine being fined for storing what they'd just stolen. That takes a special kind of nerve. But here's where the plot thickens. The real twist wasn't just about firewood. Karen and her HOA cronies had been quietly updating plat maps, shifting boundary lines, and not just mine. I dug out my original deed's old surveyor maps, even the faded letter from the developer back in 2014, all saying my fuel, my wood was within my rights. But the 2019 plat, the one Karen waved around, had shifted lot lines by 16 feet, quietly without a vote. I'll tell you what that is. That's not a clerical error, that's fraud. At this point, I realized Karen wasn't just greedy. She was orchestrating a slow-motion heist, hiding behind bylaws nobody bothered to read. I started piecing together the case dates, maps, receipts, even old trail cam photos showing my stacks well inside my line. I'm not saying I went full beautiful mind, but there were enough diagrams on my wall to make my cabin look like a conspiracy bunker. Then right on cue, the wild card showed up. Danny, young guy, green beanie, the sort who still apologizes for things he didn't do. Just dropping off the appeal packet, he said, not meeting my eyes. I asked his name, told him to tell Karen this wasn't a fine, it was theft. He looked scared, like he already knew something was wrong. Look, man, I just do compliance runs. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. The more I dug, the deeper it went. The HOA's emergency relief fund, turns out, it was bankrolling itself off seized property and fines covering up a budget hole from the last winter storm. The vendor getting paid for firewood redistribution, Karen's cousin's landscaping business. Red Leaf Solutions, last seen installing fake cobblestones in July, now pocketing thousands for hauling wood they didn't own. You can't make this stuff up. And that's when the cavalry arrived, except she didn't have a badge, just a press pass. Marcia Linney, reporter from the Flathead Ledger, walked up in the middle of a snowstorm, shivering but sharp as ever. "Heard you got something brewing with the HOA," she said, eyeing my binder. I showed her the maps, the receipts, the cam footage. Her jaw tightened, and I saw the story in her eyes. This wasn't just a neighborly spat anymore. This was corruption with a view. If you're waiting for the moment I lost hope, it came when my generator went out. Not old age, not weather sabotage. Wires snipped, clean lock forced all while I slept. Next morning, a letter was nailed to my door. "You're endangering the entire neighborhood with your obstruction." No signature, just threat. I bagged it, added it to the growing pile of evidence. This was psychological warfare now, and I'd seen that playbook before. Isolate, intimidate, paint the target as unstable. They didn't realize I'd already survived worse. That's when the second twist hit. I wasn't alone. My neighbor June called, scared out of her mind. They'd tagged her propane tank as community property, even though her late husband had said it years before the HOA even existed. "Are they doing this to everyone?" she whispered. "No," I said, "just the ones on the edge. That's how it works. They pick off the outliers first, the ones they think won't fight back." So we fought. Cameras everywhere, evidence folders, affidavits from neighbors who'd been targeted. Every week, more absurd citations arrived, improper boundaries, unlicensed fuel storage, even a fine for unauthorized surveillance equipment. My mailbox became a legal battlefield. But I knew the game weaponized the process, drown you in bureaucracy, until you quit or lose your property. Except they'd picked the wrong man. I filed a formal complaint with the sheriff. Deputy Morales, a tall guy with tired eyes, watched the trail cam footage, whistled low. "You work in law." "Used to," I said. "You got more paperwork than some of our cases." He filed it slow, sure, because land disputes crawl, but the record matters. The thing is, even when they're caught, people like Karen always have one more move. I got a burner message through the HOA forum. They did the same thing to my dad's place last year, claimed his tool shed was shared infrastructure, took his generator while he was in the hospital. I told them, send everything. Because now it wasn't just about my firewood, it was about every neighbor they'd pushed to the edge. I spent 2 days digging through public records. HOA ledgers, Montana law says you can request them. But Karen's board had buried them behind fake portals, hoping nobody'd look. But old PDFs, they never die. They just wait. And when I found the payments to Red Leaf, the forged plats, the predated asset removal invoices, it all clicked. They'd planned it prepaid the removal, then made up the emergency after the fact. It all came to a head at the New Year's Eve town meeting. Snow still piled high on the roads, but I fired up the snowmobile binder under my arm and rolled into that hall like a man with nothing left to lose. Karen tried to keep things friendly. "Colt, you made it," but her smile faltered when I raised the injunction filing. "Didn't need to RSVP. This speaks loud enough." When I plugged the flash drive into the projector, silence fell. The footage rolled Karen in her trademark red coat, yanking the survey stake out at 1:41 a.m., caught clear as day. I watched her face as the evidence looped on the screen. Then I asked the room, "How many of you got surprise citations this year?" Hands went up slow at first, then all at once. The dam broke. Stories spilled out, propane tanks, tagged wells, cut off wood piles vanished. I laid out the proof, forged maps, vendor kickbacks, missing vote logs. I held up the letter that reeked of gasoline and threat. Then came the clincher. You are temporarily barred from issuing fines, altering maps, or seizing any property until the case is resolved. And for the first time in weeks, the room breathed. Someone clapped, then another, until the whole hall echoed with the sound of people realizing they weren't crazy and they weren't alone. The fallout was fast and cold. Karen disappeared, not a word, not a meeting, just a resignation letter. her empire of pink stakes and threats melting away faster than the snow in March. The new interim board did what the old never would, voted for annual audits, required 75% resident approval for plat changes, created a resident Bill of Rights. We called it the Ramsey Rule, and for once I didn't mind my name on something. June, that same neighbor who once whispered on the phone, wore her wool coat like a badge as she chaired the new community committee. But the real win wasn't just getting my wood back, though. Yeah, they dumped what was left in a sad pile behind the shed. Half of it, moldy and warped. The real win was the letter from the Attorney General confirming the investigation: fraudulent enforcement, misappropriated funds, insurance fraud. Karen was gone, maybe in Idaho now, maybe under investigation. I didn't care. The community was ours again. Funny thing is, after all, that the legal battles, the sabotage, the blizzards, I found myself back where I started, sitting on the porch, firewood, crackling, neighbors, splitting logs together. But something was different. I'd always thought justice was about making things right. But sometimes it's about making things visible. Bullies in a snowstorm think silence is power. But justice isn't quiet. It cracks like firewood and it burns. So now I hand out folders to every new neighbor. Sample requests, a list of surveyors who aren't crooked, and one line in red: never erase a fence unless you built it. Because that's where it starts, small, invisible, until it's too late. Not here. Not anymore. Here's my question for you. When does protecting your home turn into fighting for your community? Where's the line between order and abuse, between rules and control? Did we go too far or not far enough? Let me know down below. Share your story. Tell me where you draw the line. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that the only thing standing between justice and a snow job is someone willing to say, not today.
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video.